This is the March 26th study session for City Council. We have full council in attendance. We've got 2 items on the agenda. The first is a progress update on the Community Development Design the Future program. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. And you guys be able to handle it 45 minutes with questions?
Yes, that was our goal.
Good answer.
Perfect.
Good answer.
The future is you ending in 45 minutes.
All right. The future is I named that tune in 30.
Okay.
So I am Jennifer Henninger. I'm the Interim Community Development Director here at the City of Littleton. And with me tonight, I have other members of the Community Development staff. So I'll let everyone introduce themselves real quick.
Ryan Thompson.
Alyssa Leto.
Michael Sutherland.
Rebecca Thompson, Code Enforcement Supervisor.
Carl Onsager, planner.
My name's Tim Moran.
We know you.
Show me. You have a name, man.
Show him your sign.
Shaky Cole.
You're Aquarius, right?
That's right.
And we also have
Bob Tipton. Dan Clemens with Team Tipton.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of part of our team members. So, as you're aware, we have been going through the Design the Future process for the last year. Yes, okay. And I have an interesting perspective because I have been outside of this, but involved with the City of Littleton for over 2 years, and have seen the department before, during, and now in this kind of implementation phase of the Design the Future process. And I can tell you, go ahead. It has been a major transformation in this department, and I can take no credit for that. I just happen to be here right now. So really, I'm here to brag on these amazing people that you see around me. So really, what the Community Development Department started as was a team, but a team that had core functions, and there weren't really a whole lot of cohesion or collaboration, that they were really kind of standalone entities. And when you're in community development, there's a lot of things that overlap. And as we are getting busier, and I'll go over some statistics on that, we're finding that we had to put some processes in place and have some consistencies. So when we were at this core function level, we really had a reliance on relationships. So there was a lot of, individual meetings with developers, so there wasn't a consistent message that was getting across. The process was unpredictable. Depending on who you talk to in planning or code or building, you would get a different answer because there was no set process. That leads to a lot of inefficiencies. It leads to a lot of strained relationships. And then having that no common vision or mission. Depending on who I talked to in this department, the vision was very different and the customer service philosophy was very different. So all that was going on, and then we started going through this Design the Future process. And this slide you'll probably recognize from basically the presentation that Bob and Dan gave back in November. And I'm going to have Bob to step up here, to again talk about this slide a little bit, and then I'll talk about how we have applied this.
Yes, good evening again. Going back to our meeting in November, we had a chance to talk about this slide at that point. And just to reflect on it briefly, Team Tipton thinks about cultural anchors for an organization, and we help our clients get to the point where they choose one and they begin the process of really living what that means. The 3 different options that we share, they've talked about whether you're an innovation-based culture, a relationship-based culture, or an operationally based culture. And as I reflected last November, in the world of the public sector, the obvious choice is to be in blue, which is the operational excellence. And it has the ability to provide much better customer experiences because things are predictable, particularly in the world of community development. In all the work we do in the municipalities that we work in, the one thing that we hear from those that are touching the community development departments is they want predictability, they want consistency, they want to know what to expect. So when we think about operational excellence in the context of community development, it's about putting processes, approaches, methodologies, tools in place that are consistent and help the community with predictability. So you're going to hear some very specific things about that when it comes to what Littleton's Community Development Department has done. So with any questions about this, I just wanted to touch on it to remind you about the conversation we had a few months back.
No, but there is an inverse to this. There is also operational catastrophe, which is predictable and disastrous, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to be on the positive predictability. Right?
Absolutely.
I just, because there are companies that really excel at disaster.
Unfortunately, that's true. You're absolutely right. Predictability can be bad or it can be great. And when we talk about excellence, we're talking about the relentless pursuit of standardization, consistency, predictability, eliminating waste, having things be as consistent as possible. So that's one of the definitions we have, yes.
While we strive for operational excellence, in no way does that say that we're not going to focus on customer experience or that we're not going to try to be innovative in our work and how we work, right? So it's just that you have to pick one where your focus and measurement is, but it doesn't mean the others fall by the wayside.
Great point. To remind everyone about that as well, in the circle in the middle, they are not mutually exclusive. You need to be good at all three. You choose one to extend into being primary. And that helps with decision making, helps with funding, helps with staffing, reward recognition. So yeah, you do have a focus on customer service. It just isn't primary like it would be at Disney or Nordstrom, where they will do whatever is necessary in order for you to have a great experience. That's just not possible in municipal government. So what we do instead is we talk about giving people a good experience through consistency, knowing what you can do on a regular basis. Same thing with innovation. You innovate so that you can be more operationally excellent. So you don't ignore either of the other two.
And we'll talk about some of the things that we actually have been innovating in the department. But why we need to focus on the operational excellent aspect of it is sheer volume of what's going on. And kind of just to give you an idea, last year, so in 2018, we processed over 3,700 permits of a variety of different types, whether that was co-related permits, building-related permits, home occupation-related permits, but over 3,700. And when you're talking about that kind of volume, you have to have processes and consistency in place so everybody has a great, same experience.
How many of those permits were really needed, though? I mean, we're processing 37 permits, but
3,700.
we really need to be processing 37 permits.
3,700.
I mean, at what
in
level?
terms of,
I mean, yeah, sure, when you're building a house or an addition or something, but is there a certain level where maybe we're overdoing it?
that's a great question. Those are things that we've been looking at during these programs that we're putting into place.
Thanks.
We're taking money away from the city, Jerry?
How about giving some power back to the citizens?
Also, I mean, planning-related cases, development review type cases, we approved 85 last year, and right now in process, so there are some lag behinds from last year, but already as of March, we are in processing 67, and we're only in March. So you can see that rate of projects coming in is increasing, and therefore we have to get these processes in place and the consistencies. So as Bob said, we're moving towards that operational excellence, and what that has created for us is cohesion within our department. I think just even the department or divisions represented here, and we have mediation, our new community outreach, we have building, we have planning, we have code enforcement. We're all working together a lot better to make it a more efficient process for the public. There's been a lot more collaboration, again, within our department as well as with other departments. We're doing a lot more with IT now and getting these processes in place. We're relying more heavily on IT. So Alyssa has been very integral in that process and working very closely with IT. We're also, as part of our community engagement and telling the story of what's going on with the new processes we were putting into place, we're working with communications to get that message out and to survey developers of, hey, what do you think about this? And we'll go through a whole community outreach process with the new residential review center that Alyssa will talk about here in just a second. We've also seen increased interest, again, within our division, within the city, and with developers that are out there. We've also really established our priorities and what we need to be doing to continue to move in that operational excellence direction. And these priorities are also helping us as we're going through the PBB process to set up what those programs are going to be, what our priorities are going to be. And we'll also go into a little bit of metrics here in just a minute. So what I'm going to do, we're going to kind of jump to one of our examples of a program that we will be initiating next week. I think we're doing the dry run through. So I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa here to talk about our residential review center.
Again, my name is Alyssa Leto. I am a permit coordinator with the building department. And one of the big things that has come out of this process with working with Tipton has been our rapid review, residential review. And one of the things that was kind of glaringly apparent to our department when we went out to the community and to our different stakeholders was that our process was inefficient and it was not clear what we needed and wanted. And so one of the things that we have developed is that we are now in the process of establishing a one-day residential review for small projects, meaning that you can come in with a deck and you'll know exactly what you need to have for your submittal and have for code compliance to verify those codes, and then you can get your permit within the same day, in comparison to being put into the same review cycle as a large-scale ground-up, commercial space. That 15 business day initial review cycle, it's a one-day review. And so then this would be for small scale projects, so decks, basement finish, residential interior remodel, really focusing on serving a property owner, a homeowner, being able to come in and get those projects taken care of very quickly, kind of the idea and the ideology that you can come in and get your permit on Thursday so you can do your project during the weekend and inspections the following week. This really truly kind of gives you a really great picture of this process, because it really did, we really had to work together as an entire department to establish the different requirements of what was needed to get to this place of being able to even offer this type of service. Because it really does truly work with the plans examiners, the inspectors, our permitting staff at the very front, and so that we have that transparency to the customer so that they know exactly what they need to submit so that we can review it and process in the same day. So, and the other thing that we really have been focusing on is this idea of performance indicators, being able to measure what we're doing. One of the things that we've struggled with in the past is having metrics and understanding of the volume of what we do, what we take in. And so that's something that's already being well developed and built into this process as we start it. So we already know the recording that we're going to be doing so that we can come back in a month and say, yes, we need to change, this small thing. We need a different checklist. For example, we're struggling with our basement finishes where, it's taking longer than a different type of project. So we can adjust that and continue to innovate and adapt the process as needed so that we can hopefully expand it or, narrow it and hopefully just serve more people more efficiently.
This is a good example too of the three parts of innovation, customer service, and operational excellence, as you were noting before. Kind of why we highlighted this program first.
Is there a different, I assume there's a different cost for a permit for doing a deck versus doing a house and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I like about this is actually creating almost like we're helping people to improve their homes as opposed to pushing them away and creating a burden to improve their properties or doing it without a permit, right? So I think that's a good thing. Thank you.
Yes.
And within your packets that you received tonight, you'll see this project status report. And this is going to help us track all of these different projects, and Carl can talk a little bit more about that.
So this is a tool that has been developed to, not only kind of lay out some of those problem statements about, what are we trying to fix, but also putting in, again, those metrics of what's happening right now. Where are our problems? But then also, what do we anticipate to solve with this? And then that gives us the ability, with those assumptions, to come back and say, is this actually worthwhile? Is this improvement something we need to keep doing? Is it something we need to change? And what can we learn from this process? And so the others, it's a good tool for walking through project management and some of those tools to really get these projects from the idea stage to the implementation stage to the ongoing improvement stage. And so this is a new skill for some of our employees, but it really shows an investment in continuing education through just practical tools that we're using in our office. And this is appropriate for maybe some of our larger scale phased implementations. This isn't something we're making everybody do as we build this culture of continuous improvement, that, your improvement was not permitted, you needed to go fill out the right form. That this is just one of those things to really help people walk through all the steps to get their project going.
Yeah. And have a better understanding of what tasks are necessary to get to that end point, so that everyone has clarity of where we are, what we're doing. I think a good example of that is we, had hoped we were, going to move forward straight ahead of we're going to go 1st of March, but then staff was, in training and in classes, and so now we were able to understand, okay, this is everything that needs to happen before we move forward, and now we were able to adjust and implement and move forward with a different date. So.
I just want to reflect on how different this is when we showed up a year ago. Just the conversation we had in the last 5 minutes wasn't possible a year ago. The want to inside of the community development department is very high when it comes to doing this kind of work. And the amount of trust building that was necessary and relationship building to get to this point is all worthwhile. The team now is bringing their best ideas forward. They are collaborating actively. They're discussing and learning what the other side is doing. It's a very different culture inside of community development now a year later.
Bob, how long have you been coming to the city then? Have you been in the office every day? Okay. Any part of your team? So give us sort of a feel for what you've done over the last year.
Yeah, so we kind of go in a little bit of a bathtub shape. So at the beginning, there's a lot of just structuring and teaching, and here's what we're going to be doing, and getting people together, lots of meetings and conversations, and it takes some time for people to feel that this is a real thing, that it's actually going to be long-lasting. There's a fair amount of skepticism that we find at the beginning of our engagements on a regular basis. So up front, we do a lot of work. And you saw what we came back with in some initial observations, what we shared with you. At that point, it's time for the team, the department that we're working with, to dig in, roll up their sleeves, and get real with this. And then our involvement becomes more spotty. We come in for meetings every couple of weeks. There's homework that's done in between. We check in to see how things are going. And there's a point in time where the organization's either going to own it or they're not. They're either going to be theirs or it isn't. And thankfully, the community development department here in Littleton decided to own it. And when that happens, our involvement changes again. We start bringing more work when it comes to cementing it in, to actually making it real and permanent. So we start talking about the things that has been discussed here: culture of continuous improvement, key performance indicators, implementation plans, project management, so that it becomes an ongoing thing that will last for years. And then we step away. Our definition of success is at the end, we're invisible. So we're getting to that point now with the community development department.
And I can say that every single member of the team has been involved. We've got a representation around the table, but any one of our team members could have stood in for any one of us. in this process. It's been a real ground up undertaking that I think people have really taken ownership over.
So when a customer, you call them customers, clients, developers, builder, what do you call them? What are they?
Let's call them
Yes. I just heard something on the radio today where the, I think it's important that you're not calling them a developer or a builder or, you're calling them a client or a customer. I mean, that's what they're, but are they walking away with something like that? Do they have something in hand that says, I know exactly where I stand, I know the timeline the city says that if I bring this stuff back, they know, I can get this permit done. I mean, I love this project status report. I think that's internal, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. For kind of outward facing,
right.
We have checklists, and it's very project specific. So if you're doing a commercial project, there is a 3-page checklist that has the most detailed to the very straightforward. This is everything you could possibly need these are only the 5 things that you're going to need. And the same is true for our residential projects as well. We've spent a lot of time developing the language behind it to make it clear not only for people within the construction industry, but for the homeowner as well, to make sure that they understand what it is that they need to submit, because there are code compliance that has to be reviewed and approved. But code language doesn't necessarily translate to a very clear understanding of what you need. When someone says an elevation drawing, they're like, elevation, mountains? Like, what are you talking about here? So we made it very clear within those checklists of what is required, so that I can hand a customer a piece of paper and say, this is exactly what you will need. If you come back with these things, you can get an approved project.
Right. And we've done similar things in planning with the site development plan process, and also when we enter a case into TrackIt, our computer tracking system, we automatically send an email to the applicant that says, we have received your case, we have assigned a planner to it, and you can expect comments within a week of this date.
Great.
So. And I love that you keep saying understanding what they need. Part of that understanding also comes from why it's needed. So is that part of it, that it's not just the checklist, but understanding of why? Because again, what you're going to receive is not going to be the same from everyone, depending on their level of knowledge or technical expertise, so the why is important. It sounds like
the level of education that takes place, and that's an understanding that we have as staff, is there is an amount of teaching that you're going to need to do when you engage with your customers, whether it's a developer that's been in the industry for 30 years or a homeowner that just purchased their house. It looks very different. So we have the knowledge and the understanding to convey that to them, and truly explain why it is really important that you get a building permit for your project. There's safety, and there's insurance, and there's all of this why that we do explain, and it's made real when you have a list or something that you can follow.
I think that's also an example of how the customer service focus of it also has its roots in the operational excellence. As the team looked at that, they said, well, a lot of the applications that we get aren't complete. They don't have all the things that we need. So in terms of designing the customer expectations up front and putting together very detailed checklists and trying to make that very user-friendly, it actually is making the entire process much more operationally excellent. Because what they found is that somebody would turn in a building permit application, and it would sit for a week or so, and then they would look at it and say, oh, well, wait a minute, there are 2 or 3 parts missing. Well, the customer is thinking, well, hey, I've got my review time, the clock's already started. But it actually hadn't, because not all the pieces were there. So then it would have to go back to the customer and say, no, you're missing these 3 things. And so it might take them a week or more to get that back, and then it resubmitted. And so there was a lot of, I think, frustration on everybody's side of, hey, how predictable is this? And so I think the checklists up front not only give a better customer experience, but it makes it much more efficient for the staff then to say, we got everything we need, let's run this through our process.
It's a double win.
In the vein of operational excellence, one of our goals is to complete our presentations on time. So in that vein, In your packet, so we've talked about the permit center and the one-day processing program for residential permits. But in your packet, you'll see a group of, I think it's 13 programs we currently have underway, 12 or 13. And just to run through that end very quickly, we've got a couple others to highlight. In the packet, you'll see the key measures. And these are sort of interrelated, but each program that we look at, we try and relate to certain key measures that eventually we can quantify. And well, hopefully the goal is to quantify those. Right now, our department doesn't have a good base data system of, hey, how long did it take us to review permits? But we're going to get there. And then we'll be able to measure our programs and see how they do. But just to run through these, efficiencies, improved communication.
Mike,
yes.
Why not?
What's that?
Why don't you?
We didn't have that culture. The department a year and a half ago barely used Track It. It's a powerful tool. We have it, but we didn't use it consistently.
So when it was dated on the 1st and it went out on the 30th, that's...
Yeah, and we didn't, there was nobody kind of keeping track of some of those basic things that I think the department should keep track of and have a sense and be able to report back to you that, hey, this is how long it takes us to do a certain type of permit, and we did a new program, and guess what? We cut that down by 4 days on average. We didn't have those baseline numbers to start off with, and we're trying to build that system. And
partially because the volume just looked very different. 5-10 years ago, the development and the construction that was going on in Littleton was much lower than it is now. And so there was staff intimacy of knowledge. They understood where we were, but it wasn't anything that could be produced and graphed and really explained well. And Carl can probably speak to this a little bit more about the tools that we're going to be using more, but that's one of the reasons why it just wasn't established.
So let me just reflect on that too for just a moment. One of the hallmarks of an operational excellent culture is data-driven decision-making, as opposed to anecdotal hand grenades that get thrown at people. There was a lot of stories that were being told about how long things took, but actually being able to look and see the data to compare it, very, very hard to find. So one of the things the department is doing now is building the baselines, and then in a culture of continuous improvement, everything's on the table for discussion. Innovations that have happened now maybe that are 50% successful. Maybe there's more that can be done. But we need to start with some baseline data, and that's what the department is building now.
Building, so when will we have it?
It's coming every cycle. So every time data is being collected, or a process is going through, data is being collected. It's how long that data needs to be collected before it's relevant, before it's comparable. So the data is being collected now.
So we're talking a month, we're talking 6 months, a year?
Depends on what you're looking for. Some things, if it's improved communication, you can determine that immediately. If you're really looking at an efficient process change.
So there is some info that's available now then?
Yep, data is being collected.
I think a good key on that is the memorialization of process. I think what we're talking about here is that we didn't have templates for half of this stuff up until a year ago. And so you can measure that now. We're giving examples of just a few, but some of the process maps and some of the things that we showed back in November are things that you can measure immediately. The quantifiable data, the stuff with the permit process and the timing, that's stuff that we're going to see 6 months on, maybe a year, but we can already tell that the 15 days that everybody was used to is really not that big of a number anymore. And that's what we're going to be able to tell the further we get out.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Also, a piece of that is cultural. That 5 years ago, it wasn't that we do 16 of these types of permits a year. It was this, I think staff had the feeling that every one of those 16 is an individual handshake, a relationship with the person coming in. So there wasn't data collected because every case seemed unique or different in a way. And I think they're now looking at I guess the whole problem a little bit differently. There are a lot of things that we can standardize, and if we can standardize it, we can start to measure it. And then once we start to measure it, then we can improve it.
That's the issue too, the context associated with the data you have had. The 15 days was relative, according to what Dan was saying. The timer didn't start necessarily when the developer thought it did. Establishing the rules, the context, the baseline.
But it was a number though.
It wasn't, yes. It may not have been relevant, however.
Right, but it was a number. So where are we with that number?
That's what I mean by calling it an anecdote.
So we're driving through.
Go on, Mike.
Becca, would you like to talk about the other programs we have
Sure.
underway?
So our program's underway. We've identified approximately 32 programs that we wanted to work on. And so far, we've tackled about 5. We created 4 teams to look at them. We have efficient review, and that was for the permit center and planning, effective support systems, engaged outreach, and then equal enforcement. So each team took on projects and the processes associated with them. We brought in engineering, public works engineering into the efficient review to try to, help the permit process be smooth and more collaborative, and I think that's been achieved so far.
Hugely helpful.
And it's still in the works. It's something that these improvements are ongoing and in process. We've also worked with our IT department with Track It for some improvements, and in our communications department.
So we're going to highlight 2 other programs that we have underway. This next one is the core process.
So core requests come into the department. There's a statutory deadline in which we have to meet them. I think,
If you don't mind,
absolutely.
our world of core request is different than yours.
True.
So tell us why you guys get core requests.
So we get core requests to produce documents, often permits, looking at different properties.
Who do you get them from?
Anyone.
Number of people.
Yeah.
Primarily, who do you get them from?
Primarily, it's going to be kind of 2 sources. Someone that wants to know information about a home that they own or they're going to purchase, or a developer that's looking into property.
Attorneys.
Attorneys. That's going to be a lot of what it comes down to, but it's essentially anyone that wants to know information about a structure on a property.
Thank you.
So we have 3 days to turn these around, get them back to the clerk to meet her deadline of 3 days. And so the process before, requests would come down, they'd come down to different individuals. You never really knew who was working on what, so there was a lot of redundancy, there was a lot of just miscommunications and sometimes overproduction of documents, doing the work that somebody already did. And so we've since come up with a process where that comes down. We utilize assets we already have in the department with Track It. This also gives us the ability to start actually tracking how many days did we have to fulfill this request, and how many did we complete those reviews, and how many went over. And so this is the opportunity to build that report and build those baseline metrics that we just didn't have before. And it also clarifies this is who's responsible for getting it back up to the clerk, and we've already found instances where we've been able to catch things, we've been able to make sure that things are full, complete, accurate, and a better service, because not only this is a statutory obligation for us, but this is really a point of customer service and a point of pride when we're able to fulfill a request to both speedily and completely. So.
And does this sign like somebody who's responsible from womb to tomb?
Correct. Yep. So we treat this often like in our projects, we have project manager, or not project, but planners that look and make sure that our review memos get out to the applicant. Same sort of system that we've established here, where it's one point person. Everybody else is uploading their documents into Track It, so we have those, and we could also start to see if there's a property that's been cored several times. it also is an opportunity to go back and make sure that we're not having to reinvent the wheel each time.
And it allows all of the documents into one location. Before, each person keeps it, on their computer, and they know that they sent it, but now it's in one location where we can go look at it. Anyone can.
And you know that it's actually been sent, so it's added some of those accountability checkpoints as well.
Common drive or something.
Exactly. So it also reinforces, we've started to do process documents for a lot of these things. And that not only allows you to have clarity, but it allows you to go back and improve that process because it's written down, it's codified. So, these things aren't set in stone, but it gives you an opportunity to continue to tweak. And so it's a win in the department.
Is this a new program, or is this one of many programs we've bought over the past few years?
Track it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah, I think at some point I'd like to bring our new IT director and have her kind of update you on the status of her work. But yeah, I think Track It is an example in the organization where we had good intent. I just don't think the implementation strategy was well thought out. And I think what you're hearing from the staff is that they, in essence, suffered from it. And so I think one of the lessons learned here, not just for them, but quite honestly for the entire organization, is if you're going to take on a software for process improvement, you better have a pretty sound implementation strategy that's realistic.
So we purchased it, but we didn't utilize it.
We didn't, not fully.
Because we didn't understand it.
We didn't.
But we had it.
Well,
This Cora,
Yep.
we pre-bought and saved it until we were ready.
Okay. But now we're finally going to use it.
Well, this Cora improvement process is something that was identified in the effective support systems team. And they came up with this and how to implement it.
So this isn't really something we're buying now, because we've already had
This
it.
is utilizing an existing piece of
money out
assets.
of it now.
There are software products that
exclusive to community development there.
No, it is not. The hope is that it's utilized.
But I guess just over the years, while on council, I've just seen so many times, man, we got this newer, faster, stronger, better program. And it's nice to see that we're actually taking something we have and we're going to utilize it. So cool.
So I'm going to reflect on that too. Just a year ago, there was questions whether Track It was actually the system to use. And what the community development department has done is said, no, this is the system for us to use. We're going to do it that way.
Excellent.
I'm also going to reflect on the fact that this provides better customer service internally inside the city of Littleton. It's not just with your external stakeholders, it's also between and among departments. This allows the city to know what's going on with your Cora requests. I mean, obviously, this is a non-value added activity. It's something you have to do by law. It was looked at as a real intrusion, and people kind of punted the football around to see who had to take care of it. Now you're measuring it. Now you're collecting it. Now you know exactly where things stand. And one of the things I'll point out with Carl, what he said too, is that because you have a process map, now you can train people. You have the ability to bring new people on and have them understand what to do right away. So you're getting more efficiency with new employees as well. It all fits together.
And it's not one point of failure if you lose that person.
Exactly.
It gives us the continuity and sustainability.
That's right. Succession planning, business continuity.
All right, I see my slide. Here we go. I'll be brief. So one of the things that the engaged outreach team had to talk about was what do we do when we want to engage our community, and what is the difference between engagement and outreach? And so we spent a couple sessions really kind of defining what that is, and then kind of figuring out what the process is. And of course, engagement is obviously asking, and outreach is kind of telling. And how do we do that in community development in a way that's effective, that's consistent, and it's something that we can measure? So we came up with this process map that kind of shows us the two different paths that we can take as we do our community engagement. And adding to that, then we also came up with a template of a list of kind of different outreach techniques or strategies that we can use. So we have something that everybody can refer to, given each event or each different occasion. You can cater your engagement or outreach program to that. So that was one of the things, and you can kind of see on the side the key things that we hit there was obviously clarification of steps and goals. We now have a process that's written down that we can follow and repeat and train, like you said. We have an ability then to work better with communications and use them more effectively because we know where we want to insert them in the process. make sure they're effective that way. And then again, coordinated effort and consistent. We want to be able to do these things and repeat them, and if they're effective, continue to use them. So that was one of our other projects.
This is one of those things that really is going to be utilized across the department. So after we have our dry run with the review center, we're going to be utilizing this format and this tool in order to roll it out to the public so that there is the awareness of a new program and really be able to advertise and engage the community and the people that are going to be looking for that information where it's useful to them.
So when we talk about, maybe you could talk about, so project could be a new development project, it could be a code change, so that's a little bit more in our control, right? Because we're planning for it so we can systemically think through what our outreach and engagement plan is going to be. Can you walk me through a scenario that we experience often, which is, I'll use many examples, Triple J or the traffic on Windermere or right? So how do things like that are coming from the community to us saying, I have a concern about this or I have an issue, how do you take those kinds of projects?
Ryan, do you want to share what you've been doing with Triple J?
I can. I think that's a good example of one of them. But I think when the project comes in, what we really want to decide is: are we relaying information out to the community, or are we really trying to connect with them and understand maybe their information that they're trying to provide us? So there's a little bit more give and take in the engagement. Triple J and Highline Crossing and the community that surrounds that area is really one that was more of an engagement type of process. There was some information, some questions that needed to be answered, there were some comments that needed to be responded to, and there needed to be some education. People needed to see what was going on at Triple J, and people needed to understand, and Triple J needed to understand what the community concerns were. So how do we do that in an efficient process that, number one, gets everybody kind of the information they need, keeps the city in a position where we're clear and transparent, but we're also effective in getting the information out too. We do know that when council had the opportunity to hear the residents' concerns about Triple J, there were quite a few, and I think they transcribed pretty much every one of those questions and concerns. And going through the process of engagement with the community members and with Triple J, we were able to check every one of those boxes off. We were able to address concerns about the lead particles in the air and the noise and the parking and some of those other concerns. You know, and again, it's still not open. The range isn't open yet. We don't have the opportunity to see what it is when it's actually up and functioning. But I think a lot of those questions and the need to engage with those people and have an understanding of what their concerns are, that was something that we were able to do with this engagement process.
Question, probably more for Mark than you guys. Does this process, or did it exist in other departments? And if not, or will this be used to help tweak it? Because I can see Public Works, I can see Economic Development, everyone else needing to have this sort of process for various issues.
I would say that this department, first of all, I'm extremely proud of what this staff has done here. I think they have set a new tone for the entire organization, not just for themselves. So when it comes to kind of the outreach and engagement, can other departments learn from this? Absolutely they can. In fact, I think there is need for that. Not want to pick on a single department, but using Public Works as an example, yeah, I think there's not here. Yeah, he's not here.
He's golfing.
And I think there is opportunity for us to kind of think differently about how we communicate. This has always been an important issue to me. You know that. And so I think the lessons learned here, sure, we're going to talk about that internally.
How do we know when we're successful at this? What's your measure of success?
I progressed the conversation. It's 7:15, Mike. I can cut it off.
You went to the wrong side. Back to the key measure. I had to run it back.
30 seconds. I think on the engagement, we're very interested in knowing exactly what we're hearing back and starting to establish some of those. How much are we hearing back? What's the quality? And so that way, it's an ongoing lesson learning. Is really part of that. And if we hear nothing, then obviously there's room for improvement.
I think another good way to gauge it, a real simple way to gauge it, is if they're not getting the information through this process, they know they can get in front of you on Tuesday night and spend 3 minutes in front if they're not getting the info.
So you're going to make our council meeting more efficient?
I'm hoping. To make it cut and dry, that ideally is what some of this engagement is to be able to expedite information from the city to communities that have concerns. If they're not getting it, they're definitely going to be standing in front of you. So absolutely, it's going to help to make those more efficient and more effective.
Well, your form of communicating that too, I mean, that chart is a little
busy.
Yeah.
It's busy.
And I would say
it would be nice if it just looked a little easier, but when you really do follow through, it makes sense. But I think that's part of what has always been a challenge, is that the citizens come down for 3 minutes on camera, lights, action. Council can't talk, won't engage in a conversation because it's part of our protocols. It's the worst environment for meeting their need. This is a much healthier way to do that, because at the end of the day, it isn't about coming down and yelling at council. It's about, I need help here. I need to either understand it, or I need it fixed, or I need to know why. And be able to do that before it reaches a point where they're that frustrated that they go get a babysitter and get in the car and come down and sit through whatever they have to sit through before they can finally come down and say something. And then we can't have that exchange back with them. We end up talking to you guys the next day, so you need to call these. This is a problem. And so I think this is a healthier way to be more proactive in it. The one thing I wanted to add on that yellow chart, the consistency, I really hope that is something, and I feel like it will be, because I think this is I think you guys you're getting it figured out. But that is one of the biggest problems with that department, is that, or has been, that the same person gets different answers from 5 different people in the department, and they'll call, and that person's not in that day, and so they'll get an answer. I just had that happen with with the situation. They said, I talked to so-and-so, and they said this. And then the next day I called and they were gone, and then the next person said this. I need help. Tell me. And I'm like, I don't know, Mark. But that is painful. That's painful for people, particularly when they're in a situation where there's an urgency for this information.
Have you ever talked to somebody at the IRS?
It's the same thing. Well, if you can get someone on the phone at the IRS.
They call me all the time and tell them to call them back that I'm going to be arrested.
But I think that's, I hope that's something that would be a benchmark that you can really measure, is that people that they feel like there is a person they can talk to, and that is their connection, and that is their answer, and that is who they start with, and that's who they stop with. And if they have to go to someone in between, they don't feel like they did. They feel like it was just a clean line of good communication and information. Karina?
You talked a little bit about, people coming to council and then, sharing with us what their concerns or challenges are. So I'm curious to understand, what is the intake process? To me, this sounds like, the intake can be from so many places. Is that going to get some structure so that we can all kind of get it funneled to the right place, as opposed to just always going to Mark? And maybe that's okay, but I just want to make sure that we know how we can be a part of this process and take it through the right channels, and et cetera.
We need to get out of the way.
Processes.
I send everything.
I think council gets out of the way.
Well, we're all one big team, and we appreciate when you hear if there's a problem in the department, that you let us know, and we will try and fix it. So, and the consistency of the message, the accuracy of the information is something we're trying to all work on. but we've only got 10 minutes left in our 45-minute presentation. So we probably ought to wrap up. But we can get back with you in the middle.
Mike gets a gold star tonight.
To that point, Karina, I do send everything to Mark. Because that way, Mark is the director, and he directs everything to the person who knows it for consistency. Because if I were just to call Michael or just Jennifer, they may not be the right one. And
No, me too. It's just, if it goes there, does it, it'd be good to see how much is coming, for measurement purposes, to see how much comes in this way versus another way. Because if it's coming in this way, that means something's broken on the front end, right?
Is this moving things forward?
No. So that was my point that I was trying to make. If it's coming here, that means something's not working on the front end, right?
Well, that's one of our key metrics, I think, is how many calls do we take, how many people walk through the door.
But that is a good point, Karina.
Yeah.
Because one thing I want to mention about everything that can be standardized should be standardized. In a municipal government, you can't standardize everything. You will have people who have preferences. They will make their own choices when it comes to who they talk to. The important thing is, do they get the same answer? And we want to be able to get to the root cause analysis when it comes to the challenges of getting different information. Is that a training issue? Is that I've been doing it this way my whole life issue and I need to be told there's a new way? Something. But if people are getting two answers from two different people, there's something in the system that needs to be addressed. So you're not going to stop all the people calling Mark or calling Debbie or calling whoever they want to because you're a public entity. That's going to continue. It's just, will you get the same answer, yes or no? That's a different question altogether.
And that's cross-departmental too.
Yes.
Because they could talk to the CA and then they could talk to someone in your department and get different answers. And some of that's going to happen, but to get that tamed down from the level at which it's been happening to where people are just so frustrated. By the time they've called the mayor,
That's right.
Well, and I think sometimes employees try to answer a question to provide good customer service when they really should maybe pass it on. And that's sometimes where we're getting...
Just start with Debbie.
And some people like to just start there. So you can't help that. So just in wrapping up and kind of our next steps, really we are as a team have taken ownership of this whole process. We really want to thank council for giving us the opportunity to work with the Tipton team to go through this process. It has been invaluable, and I think as a department, it has helped us tremendously, and I think it's going to be a huge asset to the city and how we operate now. And taking it to other departments of the city, I think, is a great idea. And Public Works has been involved in some of these processes as well, so they've seen the improvement that we've had. And going back to Karina's, how do we know if we've been successful? If I can hear the community say that we now have a predictable, efficient, and effective process, we will have been successful. So,
when's the next citizen and business survey?
Let's see, we do that every 2 years? I don't remember. Let's see.
Next year.
Is it next year?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, next year.
You looking for your brain over here? Is
Yeah,
that
same.
not random, you know that.
Is it possible to put a survey behind this? After a project that goes out automatically? To just say, how do we do?
So we've actually put some surveys into place for when we're doing, like we have code amendments coming up, for example. So part of that process that we put into place with the code amendments is putting together a survey. Hey, this is what we're thinking of changing with the code. Please give us your feedback prior to us even coming to you guys. So that type of survey we've put into place. But
I'm thinking of a customer survey. Somebody just got done building a new commercial building. How did we do?
We could do, as we put the residential review center into place, we absolutely could send a follow-up email, tell us how we did.
There's something called a Net Promoter Score that's used in the private sector. And it's very short, very simple. It's an implementation, but that's the concept. You should look into that concept. It's
the art of getting relevant information quickly.
Yep.
We are surveyed to death on our culture at this point.
Yep.
So finding a way to actually have people tell you the truth right away, that's an art.
Buy something through Amazon, you'll get something within days. How did we do?
It's
Minutes, actually.
Minutes.
I got two quick things. What do you need from council or Mark, or is there anything you guys need to facilitate keep moving along?
I just support and give us your feedback.
First.
I mean, if you, if you hear things on the street, let us know. Whether good, bad, indifferent, let us know so we can add that into our process and figure out how to implement and make it better.
Kind of segues into my next question, which is more of a branding question. When I mentioned community development to someone, they go, "What is community development?" You know, it's kind of this nebulous idea of, well, is it engagement? Is it, someone thought it was Western welcoming and all this stuff. It's really the built environment of the community. So I've spent time looking at some other cities and trying to figure out what the departments are called. And I don't know what the history of the name community development is, but community planning and development, something that kind of tells people exactly what that department is. Because I know what economic development is, I know what public works is, I know what finance is.
Police.
Yeah, know what police is. Community development is kind of...
Give her a treat.
Like planning.
So it doesn't need to answer tonight, but just kind of put that out there.
No, it's a good idea, I think.
I'd like to commend the Community Development Department for their courage.
Never who they are.
Take this on. The report that you see here, there's lots of great stuff. It's been hard. The team has really dug in. They have questioned a lot of things. They're continuing to question a lot of things. So it may not appear on the surface, but I want to speak as a consultant for just a moment. They have risen to the occasion. They have listened. They have worked very hard to do this, and they own this at this point. Team Tipton could not be prouder of the Community Development Department. It's been our honor to be a part of this process, and we're very excited to see what happens now as the time moves on. So thank you to the council, thank you to Mark, Randy, thank you to the Community Development Department. It's been a blast. So
it's good to see the buy-in from the staff there, except for Mike, who's trying to claw his way out to a different position.
Yeah, Mike's giving himself.
Mike's eyeing other people's He's back there.
It's been the greatest 45-minute presentation.
Mark?
Well, I think just adding on to what Bob said, I am very proud of what the staff has been able to accomplish, quite honestly, in a relatively short period of time. I realize a lot of hard work went into this, and it is about continuous improvement, so this is just the beginning. I think the other thing, maybe, Kyle, to answer your question, what is it that we can do to kind of support this, it really goes back to the project that the council did approve, and it's the larger organizational development plan. What happens in one department really has to happen in all departments. And so that is the strategy. So as we put together, Noel will come back. In fact, I think in our briefing here for the retreat follow-up, we got a little bit of an update on that larger effort. So yes, we are very interested in taking this kind of concept and pushing it into the entire organization.
I think I want to thank the team Tipton too. This, for years and years and years, is obviously as you got in here and you started to see how culturally, and there's nobody on the staff now that was on the staff 10 years ago. So there's been turnover. There was a lot of longevity for a long time, then there was slowly turnover throughout that. And so somehow that culture was the one thing that remained consistent over time. And, it probably would never even come to anybody's attention unless you were involved on a seated council. And you start getting these phone calls, and you start getting these, we don't know what that department, we don't understand the ins and outs of your department, but we know when we get that phone call that doesn't sound like that should be happening. Let me find out. And so for years, there was never solution, there was never resolution, you just didn't even want to try to solve the problem. And it is so fabulous to see that not only have you guys taken the steps to make that happen, but you are actually making that happen. I think that there is a different tone and a different feel with this department right now, and just the presentations, even though you went, by the way, 15 minutes over. You started at 6:30.
45 on the dot.
Right after we demoted you.
Taking note, argumentative.
But I think that it's notable, it's obvious, and I think it's only going to get better, and I think that that really is part of what is so important when you're trying to move the community forward, and the ambitious goals that this council set forth, and for you guys to be able to do this while working on the comp plan and everything else, and all the permits and everything that's coming through is astronomical, and it's kudos to you guys. Thank you for the hard work. Thank you for the commitment. I think we've got the right team. I mean, really, it feels like we've got the right people in place here. And I think that just your commitment to what you're doing and how you want to get better and how you want to make it better. And at the end of the day, yeah, it does make your job easier, but it is for the community. It is for the citizens. It's when the phone rings. That's where the rubber meets the road. And I think that's something that you guys are really grabbing a hold of, and I really do appreciate that. Congratulations for the work you're doing. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Okay, now you can leave. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Rebecca, how long have you been in that department?
I was hiding behind
22 years.
Yes.
something like that. I started in PD.
Yeah, you've been there a
Oh, you
while.
did?
Yeah, everybody else is newer. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Thanks, Mike, for making it
Thanks,
move.
Mike.
Keith wasn't here tonight.
If it wasn't for you, we'd still be going. Look at them, they're chasing you out.
All right.
Here comes finance.
Finance plays bouncer here.
Okay, this is one of the quarterly reports we've been promised on the priority-based budgeting, and this is a bit of an update on that. I want to just add that when Kyle and I went to National League of Cities in DC, we did attend about a 3.5-hour program on priority-based budgeting. Much of it was done by the gentleman who.
The guy, the guy.
Oh,
Yeah,
Chris.
that guy.
Yeah.
Fabian, that was.
Yes.
And Eric Heck is now working with him, so that was great to see Eric. Yeah, he's happy. And so it was a good presentation, not only because it was kind of a refresher from what we had gotten before from Fabian, but it was a lot more in depth. And they also talked about some of the communities, and there were, I think, 5 cities from Colorado that were in the room, and 3 of them were doing the program.
One of them was pretty far along already.
Yeah.
And one of them was just behind us, I think.
Right. And so there was an opportunity to they brought up some visuals and stuff and some discussions about the way that they've been able to do some of this partnership stuff with, I think you guys are going to talk about, but it was very interesting. It was worth, I have to get up on the NLC site and kind of download the presentation. We can get that spread out to council, but the charts and the graphs that they're using on that are really, really cool. The way that they're the visual for understanding, so. Okay.
Good evening, Council. Tiffany Hooten, Finance Director, and I have Sam Cox here she's the assistant to the city manager, and we're going to kind of tag team this. I'm so thankful that he took 15 minutes of my 30 minutes, and I'm sure you are too. So we will just dial this down and truck through this. I feel like I'm kind of the opposite of Chief Stevens. He is the long-winded one.
He's not even here and he gets bashed.
Exactly.
He will pay for that.
So anyway, Sienna's going to jump in anytime she wants to add anything, or I might turn to her and ask her to add some information as well. But we just wanted to kind of give you an update on PBB. I know we implemented this last year. It was our first year of implementation. It was a huge project throughout the entire organization. It took a lot of time from every department, every levels of the city within each department, and it truly was a task for all of them, and they did an amazing job. And I'm sure we've told you this before, Chris Fabian with ResourceX kind of promotes Littleton as one of the fastest implementers of PBB because we did it in such a short time. I know you probably are just grasping for information and ready to kind of look at some things and get some information. We're hoping this year is going to be that year that you can absolutely get that information. I just want to update you on 2019. We have to do system updates every year. This is something that's going to happen. Every year we have a new budget, and so we have to upload all that information for that new budget into the system. Currently, we now have a 2018 budget year, and we have a 2019 budget year. So when we're looking at programs, we can compare those programs to previous budget years as far as costs or revenues that are associated with them. So that's kind of a data dump that we get put in there. The other thing that we had to do this year and that we challenged departments with was adding their new programs. If they had a new program in 2019 that wasn't in PBB in 2018, they needed to add that. They needed to look at their cost allocations related to that program, whether it be personnel costs or office supplies or software or something like that. So departments were tasked with reviewing any new programs and adding them to the system for 2019.
We also asked departments to review their current programs. You know, last year was our first year, so we had a lot of learning opportunities. So we asked them to kind of narrow down program lists, improve definitions, and also kind of merge those programs across departments where they could be. For example, I think we had 3 collective bargaining programs in different departments. It's really the same activity, so we were able to connect those all to one place. So now you really can see what that is.
Were they all operating independently?
No,
okay.
They were all the same, just each department allocated
okay.
their cost to a separate program, so we were able to connect it to really get a better picture of what the program is. Yeah. So just working on connecting those dots.
Yeah. And I think...
Was there any recognition for departments that came in under budget or return budget? Or was it use it or lose it type thing? I mean, which is common in government.
Yeah, no, we didn't do any of that. We didn't look at anything like that as far as coming under budget. That's kind of a different part of the budget process, not directly tied to PBB in this first year or maybe even the second year. But we do look at costs overall for each department and where they landed at the end of the year.
One of the things of PBB...
I'm sorry, I just want to add quickly, sorry Karina. I can assure you that Tiffany looks at that cost very carefully over the course of multiple months. So the use it or lose it thing, you know, we obviously try to avoid that at all costs. And so I don't really like that at all. I don't want to tolerate that. And so to me, Tiffany's very good at spotting that, by the way.
The reason is, for many years I worked for a nonprofit, and we used to get items from the state. And it was amazing. The stuff we would get from the state was perfectly good. A lot of it was furniture. And the reason we were getting it is because the state had budget. So they were getting rid of really good stuff because they had budget. So they would go out and buy new stuff instead of returning it.
Yeah, I think that's where you see stockpiles of paper towels in hallways at the end of the year or federal fiscal year. I mean, that exactly. Use it or lose it. We don't encourage that here at Littleton at all.
So you're looking for, is there all of a sudden something spent suddenly?
Exactly.
One of the values of priority-based budgeting is that it ties it to a program, not a department. And so you look at what you're spending the money on, not who's spending it. So it naturally eliminates that use it or lose it mentality as well, because it's not about a particular person's or director's budget. It's here's a program that we have as a city. Is that where we want to keep investing our money? Is that something that we don't? So it kind of eliminates.
That is the hope. Right. Yeah, over time there'll be a discipline by using the system here to minimize those kind of problems. That's true.
Sure. So some of the next steps for the departments is program reviews. We kind of touched on this late last year. What we did is we asked departments to select 2 programs from their list of programs, and just so you're aware, there's about 560 programs currently in the system. So we did ask them to select 2, and the city manager's office selected a 3rd one for a number of departments. And I don't know if you recall, and we have it in the slide, but there's a PBB blueprint that ResourceX came up with to kind of guide a review of programs through this blueprint to give some ideas of are other municipalities doing this? Is there a way that we can consolidate with another department? Things like that, and it's kind of a blueprint. We went a step further and generated a blueprint template. So not only do we have the blueprint as the one-page model, but we also have a sheet to kind of guide departments, kind of ask some questions to them. What cities are providing this? Have you reached out to those? Give us a list of some cities that you've talked to. Is this a priority? What quartile did it fall in? Is it 4? Is it 3? Is it 2? Is it 1? So it kind of gives a little more guidance to departments as they're reviewing these programs throughout the year. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back and communicate those results of those programs to council towards the latter part of the year. I think the one thing that's definitely going to be different this year is our budget process for 2020. We're going to incorporate PBB review as part of that. So anytime in 2020, if a department wants to increase or expand a program they're currently providing, or if they want to add a new one, it's going to go through a PBB review process. And what that means is we're going to match it up with our goals of council, and we're going to match it up with the results to provide council some decision-making points when you're looking at policy questions in 2020. And we're going to have, hopefully it's going to be like just a one-page information on this particular program that talks about costs involved. Is there revenue potential related to this program? Are there staffing requirements which will continue in future years, so it's not just a one-time staffing increase to our budget. But it's going to provide some decision points for you, things for you to look at and ask questions about those particular programs in 2020 and going forward.
So does that mean when we go through the 2020 budget process, it's not going to be an exercise of, are you willing to add a head count to this department, and it will be an exercise of, we have a transportation mobility program that we'd like to invest more money in, and this is, so it'll be people, process, or tools, or whatever it might be. So is the question going to be phrased on an investment in this program as opposed to an investment in or money to a department?
It's going to be in the program specific, and we will have to define where it's going to be budgeted on the budget side of it.
Right, so the question to us is about the funding of the program.
Exactly. Yeah, the question's going to be this portion is personnel and this portion is non-personnel.
And that's the details that get.
Exactly.
From our perspective, that's where we begin to talk about what are the programs that this city is supportive of or not, because we always have to make those decisions, and then it falls into whoever's budget it happens to be. So we're not trying to match budget from last year or anything. That's kind of irrelevant.
We will still have that because we're required to do that on our standpoint, but you're absolutely correct. It's going to be in a policy question. It's going to be an all-in cost.
So was that question saying additional staff or staff already included? Or?
It's really, it's not even a question of staff anymore. It's more of if there's an investment in a program that we're willing to make, that may or may not include staff, right? So it's more about deciding on the program than it is the how.
If I may, just adding a little more detail to that, one of the pieces, in fact, in the 3 program review, this probably is relevant as well, but it has to do with level of service. So take that program example. My hope is that in many of those, we can actually establish this baseline or level of service. And I use snow plowing as an example. So we may come to staff and say, you know, in order to raise the level of service, if you want us to do more residential plowing under certain conditions, you want to reestablish that level, the cost for that program is X to do that. I mean, that is my goal, is that we get to that level of detail so that the council has a better understanding. What are we really going to get for that investment?
Yeah, it's actually nice to follow the Tipton process because we're using them as an example for the people going through the priority-based budgeting review. You should be identifying your levels of service, and you should be identifying where you want that to be versus where it is now. You should be having key performance indicators and metrics. Something we're having to teach a lot of people, but it's nice to have an department we can have people kind of lean on that's got examples they can show them.
So using that as an example then, so it may take 2 more staff, but we're not going to talk staff. We're just talking a level to pull that level of service off. It's going to cost X amount of dollars.
That's where we'll start, yes, and we'll certainly have the detail to tell you, manpower, materials, whatever it might be, so you can see what's
it will have detail.
Yeah, we'll have it. But it really is about if you
we're talking dollars.
Our decision's going to be at that higher level, and then how you guys execute it is going to be at yours. It's a little bit similar to how we do it now without dropping it into programs like that. It's kind of policy decisions by department, and this is by program. So many programs cross over departments, so it is going to be a different way of thinking about it. But I think it's better.
So we included in your packet a list of some of the programs that we've currently identified that we're going to review over the next few months or so. Certificate of occupancy inspections, grant management, that's a high priority for the city right now. Keith mentioned we got awarded millions of dollars of grants recently, and so we're going to be talking about how are we going to manage all of these grants and what that's going to look like. So that's definitely one of the programs that we're looking at, and you're going to see that. Business attraction, we need to get businesses in the city, and so that's one area we're looking at. Software licensing and maintenance. This kind of ties into the Track It conversation. What software do we have? What licenses do we have? Can we use these in other departments? Do we need to go outside and get another software? Probably not. We might have something in-house that we can utilize. So again, another program that we're looking at globally.
But what will happen is all of these get dropped into that quartile.
Please, can we use tiers and not quartiles?
Those 4 bars that say, this is how much you're spending, this is how, and that will help make decisions about this, because that's the data-based decision-making. So it's not, well, I kind of like that one.
Yeah.
It shows this is what you've spent on it, or this is how much you think you like it, and this is what you spent, or this you say you don't like, and you're dropping this much money on it. So that's going to be key to. And are we 560 programs? We're not going to.
It's a 2-month budget process.
No.
only programs with large changes. So like you have policy questions, we'll just be looking at the policy question type program changes.
Right. We are not reviewing 560 programs during our budget process.
Seems like we could get that down anyway. It seems like that's maybe.
Well, we've already dwindled it down a little bit. Yeah, we started at over 800, and so we've gotten it down to 560. That's pretty normal. I think the average is 400 to 600 for any city that Chris Fabian has worked with. So we're right on par with where we.
And I think what we understand you see over time is you start narrowing your programs as people get more comfortable with the system and understanding what programs really should be. Priority-based budgeting is a change in mindset, and so it takes time to get there.
And these programs that are listed here, these have already been ran through the PBB program, and so we already know which quartile these are in. We already have the cost related to it and some revenues related to it as well. And all of that will kind of come through that blueprint template that we're going to go through and then relay the results to council.
So we wanted to remind you guys of the blueprint. Like Tiffany mentioned, we created a worksheet for staff since this is our first year asking them to use it that really prompts them step by step through it. One thing I do want to highlight, I know the mayor talked about some of that outsourcing and partnership organizations. Littleton has met with Inglewood already to do kind of a program matchup. ResourceX is also trying to do a statewide matchup. And so we are looking at, we might even host kind of a South Metro matchup with some other local cities. I think Castle Pines is one of them that's going through the PBB process, just to see where we have opportunities there.
Yeah. Eric mentioned that in DC is saying, when they met with, they look at the program they do and the communities nearby and say, well, we have a deficit here and we have an abundance here, let's merge them together and be more efficient.
And I think that's valuable for us to be with ResourceX because they have that information and they can provide that to us and to other communities as well.
Well, there's a value in the regionalism that we've established, and there's a trust amongst cities. And so I think something like jumping into something like this with our neighboring cities it's just kind of a natural next step in all of us figuring out how to be more efficient and higher quality of service and lower expense.
There was also an example that it was private and public. So that, after we get through the cities, collaborating maybe some of our big private sector employers or service industry.
The next slide, Karina.
Again,
right?
But they are, ResourceX gives examples of program matchups that are outside the municipal environment. I think there was like a pancakes and programs breakfast that someone did where they brought in private sector people and talked about program opportunities. So that's a future item where we could go.
I do have a silly question. What is a program what is something that's not interested in results? It says for services not, wherever I just saw it, that isn't looking at results.
Which one are you
under the blueprint.
So for programs less aligned with results, this is in the blueprint thingy.
Oh, so when it says less aligned with results, it means really those low-tier programs that just, when you ranked them against the community results, such as safety.
So the goals or outcomes of the city.
Such as what?
Such as safety, for example.
Well, that's
our community
safety,
values.
there's a result.
Yes. Yeah. So not all programs are going to be highly aligned with all of those results. Some of them are lower aligned. For example, we might have a program like Align on Budget that we have to do that doesn't score well on the safety tier.
A good example that Eric mentioned was or I don't know if it was Chris, that there was a city that had a yoga program.
Yeah.
And it didn't really align with any of the results that the city should be of public safety,
Well, there are results, it's just not connected with something that you want.
Right, that's the point.
So
right.
they are with something, is this something we want? So
Right.
I think the wording there is a little silly.
So you brought up private partnerships. One thing that I wish we could say was a result of PBB, but it was a little premature. But I wanted to kind of share the example with you of what could come from PBB. And these are things that we're looking for and things that we're hoping that we'll be able to find. Our clinic, we have a Littleton clinic that's for employees. It's free for employees to go to the clinic. When fire was leaving the city, we knew that the utilization of that clinic was going to go down. We had an idea of how much it was going to go down. But not truly until it actually happened. But HR recognized that the service level was going to go down at the clinic, and we wanted to continue the clinic, and we knew the cost was going to be more if we didn't have some kind of partner for that. And we certainly didn't want to increase premiums related to maintaining the clinic or even reducing hours because they really enjoyed the hours that we offered. So they saw an opportunity to possibly share these resources. So they reached out to Phil Longford, or vice versa, I'm not really sure, chicken or the egg, but they did talk with Phil Longford, who had a need for an employee clinic, but they didn't have the resources or the desire to start one up from scratch. So we were able to work with Phil Longford to come up with a participation agreement. So now they are actually utilizing a portion of our appointments at the clinic. They're also helping fund the clinic as well. It's based on utilization for the most part for that clinic. But these are the kinds of things that we're hoping that we'll be able to identify and look towards through the PBB program. I think this is a prime example. I wish I could say it was from PBB, but it wasn't. But HR recognized it and reached out there, and this was a very positive result. They're happy with the service we're providing. We're happy because they're helping us fund the clinic itself. We can keep it for our employees. So in this case, it was definitely a win-win for both organizations.
Find these things. Like, is there some formula that it spits them out, or is it just thinking it through and...
I think it's just thinking it through. What we're hoping is the template that we put together will kind of spark some conversation within the departments as to, all right, well, let's reach out there because finance is making us do this, right? Let's reach out there and see if there are other entities that are providing this. And that's what we want to do. We want to spark the conversation and have them make those questions of themselves. And hopefully they can find something out there that will help.
Yeah, it makes people think differently, and that's key.
Yeah, just kind of reinforcing that. I think that the mapping exercise, for example, that we did with Englewood, you see some of these common services, and the natural question is trying to understand, well, what is it they're doing and what is it we're doing? Do we have capacity, or do we need to look to contract perhaps with them? And so it isn't a kind of a way to push the conversation forward. Otherwise, there's not much motivation typically. And so that's kind of, I think, the power of something like this.
Kept it under 30 minutes.
Nicely done.
Nice. Yeah.
Yay. Any questions?
I just want to say we're really excited about 2020 budget year and what PBB can do.
Of course you are.
Can we put in the
You're
budget?
the only one.
Can we put in the budget like a little kissing machine, a suck-up machine?
No. I think one thing that I do want to note is, Council, you did approve a budget analyst for finance, and we have that person on staff, Stacy Covington. She's been with us for a few months now, and we are truly excited to have her part of our team. She did a fabulous training on Monday, which unfortunately I wasn't able to attend, but from the feedback that I've gotten, she did a great job, and she is really going to be the one who's going to spearhead PBB from here on out. And we've given her some pretty high goals, and we wholeheartedly believe she can fulfill them, and I definitely think she's going to be a great asset for PBB, not only PBB, but the budget, the city as a whole.
Excellent. So, raising the level. I love it. Thank you. Questions? No?
No.
Thank you.
Great job.
City manager, do you have anything? You want to whine about your arm for a
I was
minute?
going to say, just a reminder, that Friday starts my little journey. I'll be out a week after that, so you can call me if you need to. I may not be coherent for the first few days.
That'd be a good thing, huh? The first couple of days, Mark, I need you to do this. Oh, okay, yeah.
The computer, please.
We'll just call Randy.
For a thing.
No, that's it on my end.
I would like to, I did some counting tonight of how many times we asked questions or comments as a group. So 40 times the presenters were stopped in order for our question or input. And so part of what takes time, when we commend them for taking less time or more time, is how much time we take out that adds up to their time. And guess who did the most? Yes.
Now that's a
representation of my engagement.
That's right. That's right.
13 times.
Thanks for keeping track.
Okay, cool. I don't think we have...
How many of us had the same question? Several of us had the same question.
I don't think we have any breakfast or anything coming up. Just trying to calendar out. We just have our council next Tuesday, regular.
Let's see. Not aware of anything.
Don't look at Randy, look at Sam.
Yeah, sorry. I'm focused on Friday.
Okay, we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.